Welcome to be faithful to yet another potential wasting episode of the Runback, the series where our strikes always blaze with glory. The world of indie fighting games is a lot like the animal kingdom. There's a good amount of them, only a chosen few get any shot at surviving, and very few make it to adulthood. And nothing embodies this blunt force allegory more than 2024's Blazing Strike.
Developed by Rare Breed Makes Games, which just could be one guy, maybe more, I've never really found the answer. Spent nearly a decade just trying to exist. From scrapped early concepts, a pivot to 3D to pixel art, a failed Kickstarter, and years of delays. Publisher X's Games kept it alive, giving it the runway to finally release in 2024. But even then, it felt unfinished. Rough systems, missing polish in the sense that it needed more time in the lab. Asking $40 for a mostly untested indie fighter didn't help, and somehow it even got a main game slot at Frosty Faust in 2025, no doubt thanks to Axis. But after a top 8 of throw loops that would make high-level Street Fighter 6 blush, all the hype for Blazing Strike blew away like so much turds in the wind. After all that struggle, it didn't just fail to make a splash, it sank. Or was preyed upon? If we're still going with the animal kingdom metaphor, whatever.
Those who are in the know might have already noticed that we reviewed this game a year ago, and we came across liking it enough despite the flaws. But some time has passed now, and we decided to give the game another look. Did it improve in any significant way? Doesn't fucking feel like it. But we're gonna talk about it a little more in depth anyway. This is Team Crossbody, and this is our look at Blazing Strike.
We're just warming up now.
While the overall quality of the game is questionable at best, the actual mechanics are at the very least interesting. There's a lot of inspirations that you can suss out from Blazing Strike just by looking at it, and the same can be said about its gameplay. There's a lot of floating ideas here. If I were to simplify the mechanics by comparing them to a couple of games, I would say at its core, Blazing Strike is what you get if you gave the SNK fighters such as KOF 98 or Garo Mark of the Wolves Mortal Kombat's run button and stamina system.
With that being said, if you know your SNK fighters, then you'll feel right at home here. This is a 5-button game with 4 attack buttons, 2 lights and 2 heavies. Close heavy punch reserved for throws, and there's pretty standard movement and jumping arcs across the roster. There's a couple of special moves, blah blah blah, you get the picture. What makes Blazing Strike interesting is its running or rush mechanic. This is the core of the game, with most of what your character can do being tied to it.
Rushing modifies character movement. Walking backward or forwards becomes a run or backdash respectively. It also dramatically alters jumping arcs, both doubling their height and range, essentially turning them into super jumps that you will find in a versus game. But beyond simply providing faster or more varied movement, rushing is primarily used to gain access to a fighter's rush attacks. Much like with the movement, rushing attacks are enhanced normals that work like one-button follow-ups or target combos. These modified normals typically move your character forward, extend combos, and apply real pressure. They're faster, cover more space, and often allow for conversions you wouldn't normally get, because without them, your overall combo potential is pretty weak. In practice, rush turns your character from playing grounded footsies into running layered offense, with rush attacks acting as the backbone of your pressure and combo structure.
But you just can't spam these things and assume everything's going to be fine and dandy. Some rush attacks don't universally hit mid, with a few actually whiffing on crouchers. Now, I don't really know why they do this. It's not like the ones that hit high do more damage or anything. Maybe it's for variety's sake, they just kind of do. I guess that's fine though, since these cases are far and few between. And each fighter usually has at least one rush attack that hits mid anyway. These can be cancelled out of light attacks to apply pressure, and on hit are using some pretty free-flowing combos because of the way the hit stun works. This isn't necessarily a great thing if your opponent knows what they're doing, but some fighters actually have launchers attached at the end of their individual rush attacks, and that's a very important tool that we'll get into later. Canceling any normal to a run is called a rush cancel. While it has some uses being used off lights, Rush Cancel's main utility comes from being cancelled off of heavies to help string together attacks that doesn't naturally link. It's flexible enough to be used in both block strings and combos.
Each fighter comes with 1 or 2 EX moves, which can come in the form of either a normal or a special move. EX moves cost half the rush meter and usually powers up a move by making it recover faster or giving it a wall bounce or launcher properties. You may not even notice them right away, because unlike most fighters that give EX moves a flashy visual cue, in Blazing Strike they just kinda briefly flash white. Pressing the rush button twice will make a character perform a rush ability at the cost of roughly a third of the rush meter. These are specialized techniques unique to each character. We'll go deeper into these a little later in the video. Blazing Strike also has 2 forms of parry, similar to that of the Street Fighter 3 series, which can be used by pressing forward within a short window of when the opponent's attack is about to land. I don't really know what to say, it's a parry. You risk your defense in order to create an opening, and it feels pretty close to Street Fighter 3.
There's also the game's combo breaker mechanic called the rush parry, which works in the same way a normal parry does, but with the forward button being pressed along with the rush button. When timed correctly, rush parry causes a brief slowdown that frees the opponent for a moment. On the surface, it seems like a strong way to counter combos, but it costs almost all of your rush meter, and there's ways to bait and punish it. Honestly, we didn't find much ways around it ourselves, but a lot of combos we found online claimed the game had tons of infinites. They were misinformed. I don't blame them, the game doesn't really explain rush parry, so it's understandable. Technically, as long as you have the meter and you time it right, you can break nearly every grounded combo, but that's the key word, grounded. The most effective way to bypass rush parry is by launching the opponent into the air, which makes it less of a universal counter and more of a situational tool. Now when it comes to the corner and juggling, yeah, the game can turn into an infinite spam nightmare, but you know, just don't be there. It works for Marvel too, it can work for Blazing Strike, just saying.
The last thing to cover is the game's sorta comeback mechanic, Blazing Rush. This is a special state that temporarily gives you full rush usage for about 10 seconds. You have to be careful when deciding to use it though, because once it runs out, your rush gauge remains unavailable until the start of the next round. It's one of those whatever mechanics. It definitely has a Bloody Roar Hyper Beast mode vibe to it, but it doesn't feel particularly useful, and it isn't really worth risking your meter for an entire round. Of course, all these mechanics are tied to the rush meter itself. Running out of the resource puts you in a brief groggy state if you're still holding the rush button when it empties. The game is fairly forgiving here, giving you some time to realize that you're out of juice. And honestly, I don't really like that. I feel the game should punish players instantly for overusing the rush meter. I also think the meter recovers a little too quickly once it's emptied. But then again, I'm not really a fan of cooldowns in my fighting games. We like the mechanics of Blazing Strike. Aside from a few iffy spots like the meter economy feeling a bit off, a lot of these ideas seem well thought out and flow well to each other fairly solidly for what they're worth. I find the combo breaker mechanic especially interesting. It gives the game sort of a crappy Killer Instinct and or Dead or Alive vibe, where you can't afford to be too predictable with your combos or pressure, or they'll just get broken or parried. I do wish it costs less meters so it shows up more often, but at the end of the day, a fighting system is only as good as the characters using it. But before we get into the roster of Blazing Strike, let's talk about the presentation of the game real quick.
Let's try to make sense of the world these characters are stuck in, because Blazing Strike's story feels like you walked into a movie 20 minutes late, and now you're squinting at the screen trying to piece together what happened. Set in the ruined aftermath of some Angel Sugared apocalypse by a dude with big Gil from Street Fighter 3 type energy, the world of Blazing Strike is already broken before the first fight even starts. Governments are gone, power has shifted, and characters speak like you be keeping up with the lore in a weekly newsletter. The problem is, the game never really grounds you. It throws out terminology, references, past events, name drops factions, and treats major world-shaking incidents like common knowledge. There's no Ouroboros, no clean exposition, just vibes and proper downs.
And the way the plot presents itself doesn't really help. The story is told through a matchup of comic panels, sprite-based animated cutscenes, and static character portraits paired with long paragraphs of straight-up text. One moment you're flipping through what feels like a motion comic, the next you're watching sprites nod at each other dramatically, and then suddenly you're reading a lore dump that looks like it escaped from a visual novel. It's not like any of these methods are bad. It's just that the constant switching between them makes everything feel disjointed. There's no consistent rhythm to how information is delivered. Important moments don't always feel important, and quieter moments sometimes come with walls of text that demand you parse out political backstory mid-session. So instead of building momentum, the narrative feels fragmented. You're not just trying to understand what's happening with the plot, you're also trying to understand how the game has decided to tell you what's happening at that time. And even with all that said, we really did try to pay attention. We really wanted to give it a fair shot, but eventually it kind of just wears you down. A lot of it feels shallow, not necessarily bad, just undercooked. Big ideas get introduced and then barely explored. Dramatic confrontations happen without the build-up to make them hit as hard as they should.
Wait a minute, hold up. That's not saying there's nothing to like. Some characters actually do shine through. MJ and Pink, for example, actually feel like they have personalities beyond fighter and dystopia. They bounce off the world in a way that makes sense, and it makes it feel a little more alive. And honestly, the world of Blazing Strike itself is interesting. A fallen civilization shaped by a pseudo-religious ideology and raw strength. That's a strong foundation, a little generic, but hey, it's a dystopian backdrop. What are you going to do?
Oh, and spoiler alert for Blazing Strike, I guess. The story wraps up with one of the main antagonists, Magnus, attempting to obtain a fragment of power from a godlike figure who destroyed the world in the first place. His name is Dio, by the way.
No, not that Dio. Dio actually means God.
Yeah, but come on, everything is a JoJo reference. Anyway, you beat Magnus, then Eric shows up, and it turns out he's a henchman of Dio? Maybe? It's kind of implied more than explained. You fight him too. Then Magnus turns into a monster, you beat that, and the game ends on a straight up to be continued. No resolution, no real clarity, just clickbait for a sequel. It genuinely feels like they ran out of time mid-sentence and hope there will be a follow-up game to clear all this up later. Oh, and Mateo's killed. That's nice.
All of this to be continued in the game's sequel, Blazing Strike: Eyes of Heaven. One thing I enjoy about Blazing Strike is its graphics, even if it's not the most talked about aspect. The graphics lean into this retro-inspired 2D fighting game look, and while it's not perfect, it generally nails the aesthetic it's going for. Even with characters clearly missing sprites from moves, making general combat feel a little jerky, I still appreciate the attempt that was made. While the story itself is all over the place, the little comic panels are very well presented. The character portraits shown during dialogue are nicely done, providing a closer look at each fighter with more detail than the in-game sprites can show. I like that. They gave the characters a little extra personality and presence that help make the world feel a bit more alive, even if the story is chaotic. Speaking of characters, I think the designs are solid. Each fighter has a recognizable silhouette and color scheme, and while some are exaggerated, they feel mostly like they belong in the same world the game is trying to build. MJ, Pink, Magnus, Mateo, and Erlich all have enough personality in their looks to stand out without feeling completely disconnected from the setting. All this praise comes with the knowledge that the game was largely handled by a small team, at the very least. I'm not trying to dog on the work they did here. It's a commendable job. Obviously, it's not perfect by any stretch, but they did enough to get their general point across, and I think a lot of heart went into this.
Speaking of heart, the music of Blazing Strike really grew on me the more I played it. Beyond the obvious parry mechanics borrowing from Third Strike, I think the game's strongest influence from those titles is the soundtrack. The music feels like a fusion between Double Impact and Third Strike, blending house, drum and bass, jazz, EDM, and hip hop in a way that gives each match a distinct energy. Honestly, it might be the best part of the game. And much like the online edition of Third Strike, each track comes with a few variants that shifts the tempo as the match transitions between rounds. And there's even a pause version of each song. These little touches add polish and keeps the soundtrack feeling dynamic and responsive to gameplay, making the music feel like an active part of the battle rather than just background noise. On top of that, the tracks feel tailored to each character and stage, helping reinforce the personalities and themes of both. A techno-heavy beat for a high-tech stage feels different from a jazzy, street-level track, and all helps the world feel more cohesive. So while being very influenced by the Street Fighter 3 line of games, Blazing Strike does enough with his music to pay homage to those games while keeping his own identity intact. And as a quick tangent, see, this is all I wanted from Street Fighter 6. Make good music that honors some of the best music that your series has ever had, not whatever Hello Fellow Youths thing you're going for.
Hey, hold on to your seats.
No matter how hard I try.
First up is Blazing Strike's poster boy Jake. I could easily just label him as a Shoto, but he really doesn't feel like the archetype. His main and best tool is his fireball, and it's a good one. He's able to run a little behind it from mid to far screen, which makes his zoning fairly strong. He also has a lunging neutral skip move and a ground quake that looks like it should be a good anti-air, and it is, a little. The heavy and EX version of his move can anti-air, but you have to almost immediately know if they're going to jump since the startup is pretty long. The EX version has a larger hitbox and way faster startup, with the added bonus of launching the opponent for a juggle, so it isn't all bad. And this is why I can't really call Jake a Shoto. He doesn't have a reliable anti-air at all. As a matter of fact, he's pretty free to jump in general outside the pretty risky ground pounds, so he's primarily a zoner, peppering opponents with his energy cannons and maybe challenging their approach with his little dash swipe move. His rush attacks are pretty bad because they both start high and neither of them launches, which I think is a key attribute of what makes a character strong in Blazing Strike. That just reinforces the zoner playstyle even more. His rush ability is this arm stretch that will help him set up juggles, but it can only be used in neutral and will miss if used during combos. All in all, Jake feels a little incomplete as a fighter. His lack of a good natural anti-air, no real way to pop up the opponent without meter, meaning he'll have to deal with drop parries more than most, and virtually no mid attack just makes him the fireball guy, who can't really stop anything. He kind of just confuses me. Just give him a good anti-air and I think we'll be okay. Oh, and his pretty long reaching sweeps hitbox becomes super inconsistent when dudes are just casually crouching. So that's neat.
Shinzuki, I'm 90% positive, is supposed to be the Ryu to Jake's kin, and he's another unconventional shuttle type character. Shinzuki is more of a rushdown character though. He does have some mid-screen control with his, I want to say fireball. It's more like an extended punch, which are technically what fireballs are in general, but you get the point. He also has a scuff-looking Tatsumaki crescent kick that works as a decent anti-air, and a dive kick that doesn't really lead to much and has a hefty amount of recovery frames attached to it. His rest attacks are at least better than Jake's, although they don't lead to much either. Suzuki also needs meter to launch, but I don't think these two problems necessarily makes him a bad character. I think he wants to stay up close thanks to his rush ability, a dash that can pass through the opponent. I'm thinking he's designed to mix people up, forcing left-right mix-ups and guessing on strike throws to get his offense going. It also messes with the timing of rush parries, which adds another layer to his pressure. He's an interesting character. Let's continue the streak of being confused about what a character does by talking about Graphy. I'm not entirely sure what he wants. His kit feels all over the place. He can blow fire in front of him, he can ride on his skateboard sword thing as a combo ender with the heavy version giving him the option of switching sides. He has a sort of dive kick where he spins on his board as a combo tool, and he has a standard dragon punch. His rush ability has him throw a can of paint as an additional zoning tool that will stun for a short time if it connects. If anything, I suppose you can call him an all-rounder. He does have a really good jumping heavy punch that works as a great air-to-air and will float the opponent for follow-up juggles, which roughly translates into spamming jumping heavy punch a couple more times until the ender of your choice, if you want. You could do more, but I'm talking about if you don't want to spend any resources. Speaking of resources, Graphy has hands down one of the worst super moves I've seen in any fighting game in quite some time. It's this slow startup, slow moving mask guy with absolutely no real use. Graphy has no launchers, no real way to loop his juggles, and an inconsistent moveset. He kinda sucks.
Pink, or Pink Samurai, is a pretty straightforward character, thank you. As the title says, she's a samurai and therefore has a pretty long sword to fight with. Use sword to keep people out, that's it really. Her special moves are whatever. A slam that will knock down, a huge anti-air, and a fireball that can wall bounce with meters spent. All of these moves require Pink to have ammo in order to use them, and she can reload her gun using her rush ability. It's kinda strange though, Pink needs resources to perform her special move, and her unique character ability is just reloading said resource, which costs her rush meter. And it's not like she reloads fast or anything, she's stuck there for quite a bit in fighting game time. It seems like reloading shouldn't cost her both time and rush meter, especially when that meter could be put to better uses like rush cancel out of her predicamental normals. As it stands, Pink is an okayish character who's pretty sluggish and way too meter intensive for no real good reason. Plus, she's kinda parry food and neutral.
MJ is the game's premier rushdown character. I mean, nothing in her moveset suggests that idea, but I never said we wouldn't be doing a lot of heavy lifting when it comes to figuring out what these characters are and the semi-vague things that they do. Let me try this again. MJ is a character. Yeah, that sounds more appropriate. Typically when it comes to these hyper-aggressive archetypes, they have some kind of move that allows them to aggressively push themselves towards the opponent. Off the top of my head, Cammy has her spiral arrows and dive kicks, and Fei Long has his Wrecker series and Chicken Wing. You get the gist. MJ does have something like this with her little tornado kick, and it does knock down, which is good for getting her on top of someone, but it doesn't have that surprise factor. It's too slow. So it's really only useful as a combo ender for hard knockdowns. Okay, what else does she have? Oh, a counter? Okay, why would she need something like this? Sure, Street Fighter 4 Cammy had a counter ultra, but that was a desperation attack. MJ's counter can either knock down or leave the opponent standing to be followed up by her rush attacks. Her last special move is this series of kicks that launches on the final hit. It's bad. You can barely connect the last hit unless you're pushing right into the opponent. And if it does land, she can't do anything after because she recovers so damn slowly. Her crappy collection of special moves is the core reason why I don't know what the hell kind of archetype she's supposed to be. At least everything else about the character is fairly solid. She sports some of the strongest buttons in the game, her rush attacks are all great, and she even has one that launches the opponent after a wall bounce, giving her an easy way to get around rush parries. Her rush ability is an actual overhead that she can link into a light kick afterwards. The only thing she's missing is a meterless way to loop combos in the corner. MJ is kinda whatever, but in the land of whatever characters, she's not completely ass.
One roster member who isn't whatever is Blazing Strike's only grappler, Alexander, the character who took what was already left of the game's diminishing public opinion and throw looped it right into the dumpster. And since this isn't part of a long running IP, we're not going to pretend it's good here. Since then, I believe the loot was taken out of the game, or at least made harder to do. But it doesn't matter, let's talk about Alexander. Now, outside of his tournament defining appearance, there isn't really much to say about the big guy at the basic level, as he's exactly what you'll expect when someone says the word grappler. Slow moving, giant buttons, huge damage potential, and the other reliable body splash. It's all present and accounted for. He has armor, but it's not on his grabs. It's actually on his rush ability, which has him running a short distance with armor attached to it. If it hits, then good? Yeah, it's not like it leads to anything, at least not by itself. I want to say it leaves him with enough hit advantage to force a strike throw mix up, but there's no strike throw with Alexander. Let me explain. First off, he only has two special moves, a standard grab and a lunging grab. What's strange about these moves is that they aren't command grabs, the opponent can block them, which means he's a grappling character with no unblockable command grab to run his game with. And I'm having a really hard time understanding why this choice was made. I have two running theories as to why. The first might be tied to the rush system itself. Since he already has really huge buttons and the ability just to run on the opponent, he constantly being everyone's faces, forcing his gameplay down everyone's throat. And that's not fun for anyone. I suppose this would make sense. The second theory comes from Frosty Faustin's 2025. Now, since the game died so fast, I can't recall if Alexander throws were unblockable when the game first launched. And then, after its embarrassing showcase at the tournament, they were made blockable to prevent the loot from being done. This also makes sense, given that it will be a super easy thing to patch into the game without much work. There's also a super secret third theory, and that is, it might be just Blazing Strike. As you can see from the characters we covered so far, it's designed pretty strangely to begin with. With that being said, it's not like Alexander doesn't have a pure command grab, it just happens to be tied to his super, where he uses his animal friends to alley-oop him into an Azuna drop, which is pretty tight. It's like they gave Snow White a command grab. All in all, Alexander, even with the possible nerfs, is still a very strong character in the game.
There's not much to say about Ryohei. As it stands, he's probably the most boringly designed character in the game, from both an appearance and gameplay standpoint. Just think of any sword guy from any other fighting game, put him in a vaguely gay shirt, and you've got this dude. Ryohei is a fairly standard all-rounder type character, but I guess ideally everyone can be described that way thanks to the rush system. He's kind of similar to Pink Samurai, except he doesn't have the gimmick attached. He has an air fireball he can run behind, and his rush ability allows him to absorb incoming projectiles and convert them into his own. But that's it. He's just bland. He's better than Pink, but Pink is also more interesting, so yeah.
Hana's another odd one when it comes to archetypes. She sports a pretty underwhelming fireball, what looks to be an anti-air dragon punch, and a neutral skip and diving attack that places her either in front or behind the opponent. If I had to label Hana, I'd say she feels like a mix between a Shriekster and a hit and run character. Her rush ability kinda gives this away. Hana prepares the next attack with a damage over time effect, so ideally she lands her rush ability, then pesters the opponent by keeping them out with her fireballs and dragon punch, taking additional pot shots with her large buttons, and mixing her diving attack if she scores a knockdown. On paper, it sounds like a character built around annoyance and momentum. Tag you once, back off, and let the damage tick while she forces you to deal with layered pressure. Whether that actually works in practice is another question, but the intent at least feels clearer than some of the other designs.
I'm just gonna be straight with talking about Lei Long and not beat around the bush. He feels like shit. His moveset isn't interesting. He has a fireball, this attack where he spins his electric prayer beads, and a shockwave that looks like a reversal. Both the fireball and the prayer beads apply a stun effect on their heavy versions, but I don't really know what they're for. Yeah, the fireball makes sense, it gives him time to come in, but the prayer bead spin attack has a bad hitbox, and is too slow to combo into anything. Worst of all, his rush ability turns him into a statue that tanks a hit. But what's the point? You can already block. They want players to burn rush meter where they can just block? Lei Long sucks. Mateo here feels like an unfinished concept. His gimmick is that he can transform into a monster or a demon or something for his super. But let's cover his base form first. Don't worry, there isn't much. Most of his special moves just feel like combo filler. They don't particularly stand out. He has a 3-hit string that pushes the opponent full screen, an uppercut that can be used as an anti-air with the EX version launching, and an attack grab that causes a hard knockdown. His kick rush attack pops the opponent up for a juggle. He doesn't have a rush ability at all, probably because of his transformation hook. Speaking of the transformation, when he enters this mode, he only has access to 2 attacks, regardless of the button pressed. And from there, he can use an additional super while in this form. The main claim to fame here is the infinite armor. Literally nothing can stop him while he's transformed. And that's nice and all, the issue is that it doesn't really flow into anything. Mateo can combo reliably in his normal form, but there's no way to combo into his transformation. The transition itself has a hitbox that will knock the opponent away if it's juggled into. Once he's in his demon form, there's just no consistent way to land his demon form special attack. You have to kinda throw it out randomly. Once Mateo transforms, he can't really force anything. The opponent knows you have a timer and will just disengage until the timer runs out. And it's not like he has a throw or anything, just those 2 attacks and the super punch. Mateo is cool on paper, but that's about it. He offers nothing you can't get from any other character on the roster.
Like Oro, who is disgustingly straightforward for his character design. I feel he's generally a brawler with a low hit and attack throw, with the light version acting as a feint, a Russian special move, and a series of punches that last quite a while, and feels more like a knowledge check too, since they'll completely shoot through your guard stamina if not parried, and a dive bomb that causes a knockdown. His rush ability gives him an invincible punch. His super is also unblockable, and that's about it. There's not a lot going on with Oro.
Nagi is a space control character sporting several long-reaching buttons. Her special moves include her snake piercing the ground to keep the opponent at a distance, a lunging bite that knocks the target a good distance away, and a paralyzing gaze that stuns for a short time. Her rush ability loads a poison that augments our heavy snake normals and specials, specifically the ones featuring a biting animation, altering the hit stun effect. Her super is also a huge fuck-off laser beam, which isn't very snake-like, but I'll never say no to a huge laser beam. It's literally a hyper viper beam, which may be a reference. The jury's still out on that one. She's a little slow and absolute parry food, but I don't know, she's okay. If Jake is Shoto-like, then Zero is the actual Shoto of Blazing Strike. His moveset reflects that. A pretty fast laser, a dragon punch, and a plasma ball that acts as another anti-air if the opponent tries to get a read on Zero's laser at mid-screen. His super could also be used as yet another anti-air, so I'm guessing the message is simple: don't jump at this character. Zero also has the best movement in the game thanks to his rush ability, which allows him to fly around freely. While airborne, the rush meter slowly drains, and attacking causes it to drain even faster since he has access to all of his air normals during flight. Zero can pull off some pretty tricky left-right mix-ups and confirms from this, so he definitely has the option to rush down a bit if he wants to. Zero's potent zoning alone makes him among the strongest, in our opinion.
Another strong character who prefers to keep people at a distance is Michizuki. She sports very powerful disjointed normals and special moves that do a great job of keeping opponents exactly where she wants them. By combining her mid-range chain normals with her rush ability, which let her teleport in 4 cardinal directions including behind the opponent, she gains strong options for baiting and repositioning. It also allows her to punish players who get a little too comfortable trying to parry her pressure. At her best, Michizuki turns the screen into a guessing game, where you're always one step behind them. She doesn't overwhelm you with speed or gimmicks. She just quietly controls the space until you hang yourself trying to escape it.
We wrap up Blazing Strike's roster with one of his 2 boss characters, unlocked after completing the story mode, starting with Magnus, who I believe is single-handedly the best character in the game. Magnus has whatever special moves. He has a fake machine gun blow, and he actually has a solid DP with his fake genocide cutter, but his most important tool comes in a 3-hit attack that launches the opponent. In a lot of ways, Magnus can be considered a more rushdown oriented version of Jake, as they share similar traits, like a wall bouncing EX heavy punch and a rush ability that functions as a stretch and arm command grab, dragging the opponent closer. Magnus has the best corner carry in the game. He can easily juggle the opponent from mid-screen all the way to the corner without burning through his rush meter too quickly. And once it runs out, he can often just keep the juggle going long enough for it to refill if he needs to spend more. This is all thanks to that 3-hit launcher, which buys him just enough time to make this whole sequence possible. If your timing is good enough, you can keep someone airborne for a very long time. That might just be because he's a boss character, so his standing in terms of conventional balance is kinda up in the air. The only real issue Magnus seems to have is a pretty severe matchup problem against zoners, with no consistent way to get around their game plan. But outside of that, he's pretty much the perfect rushdown fighter for Blazing Strike.
On the opposite end, Ehrlich is another one of these unfinished villain characters, although he does have some pretty cool special moves. First up is a really good fireball that shrivels under other projectiles, a single punch special that wall bounces and set up for juggles, and a dive bomb that, if it lands, set up for even more juggles. His rush ability activates an invincible barrier that passes through projectiles while having an active hitbox. But that's not all. His punch rush attacks also give him another meaningless way to launch the opponent, while his super has him crashing down, summoning 2 pairs of energy on either side, taking up tons of real estate. Much like Mateo, nothing about him flows very well. Despite having multiple ways to pop the opponent into the air, he really only has one consistent way to combo. Trying to cash in on his super is a hassle too, because it's far too slow and the hitbox isn't great. but I did find one way to make it work. Ehrlich kind of sucks, but he's a pretty fun character to use.
Everyone has one or two things that they strangely fixate on at any given time. Blazing Strike was like that for us. Hopefully, making a more focused breakdown of the game can finally exercise this spirit from our channel, because we gave this thing far more attention than pretty much anyone else on this website at this point. But why of all games was Blazing Strike hanging around the back of our heads? Maybe it was because of how close the game was to actually being something special. And no, not special to every Tom, Dick, or Harry, but special to us, Team Crossbody. And it was one of those annoying feelings that constantly had us repeating little things like, if the game was more polished here, if the game was more focused there, because Blazing Strike, for all of its faults, has a lot of good to it. The graphics, music, and the idea of what the gameplay was going for don't just feel like random elements thrown together to cynically create a fighting game. Well, maybe the rush system. That feels a little forced, but that's besides the point. Ultimately, the purpose of this video was to really give Blazing Strike a closer look to see if it was any good by our standards. And on that end, despite how we feel about it, despite how much love we believe was put into the game, it clearly isn't. That's pretty obvious. But I can confidently say that we still enjoy it enough. Because when it's all said and done, how something is received by the masses doesn't really matter. What gives something worth is how individuals feel about it. And on top of that hopeful note, Resident Evil Requiem is trash.
Well, that closes this blazing episode of the Runback. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Is hype still around? Well, do that if it is, and we'll see you next time.
Team Crossbody.
All right.